Okay, brilliant. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar for collective self-insurance and our Operation and Maintenance O&M Club. It's very exciting for us to share with you the model and how we see that the club can support the industry in moving towards a more unified, cost-effective O&M regime and ultimately save money from large periods of downtime from unexpected failures caused from defects and leading to catastrophic events with currently, for many sites, limited insurance coverage. The idea of a collective self-insurance has drawn interest in the energy sector because of difficulty obtaining the necessary insurance cover from the traditional insurance market. There has been an impressive increase in offshore wind in recent years, and an increase in the number of sites and their impressive power capacities. This has led to challenges and complexity around the management and maintenance of critical infrastructure, such as subsea cables that connect the wind turbines to the onshore grid. This session today is an opportunity for us to share with you our approach to asset management and insurance. In other words, our collective self-insurance model and O&M club. The club was developed as an optimized asset management solution. Asset management is crucial for ensuring the reliability and performance of subsea cables transmitting power from the offshore wind farms to the grid. By integrating insurance considerations into asset management strategies, operators can better assess and mitigate risks and optimize maintenance activities. By introducing a collective self-insurance model alongside self-managed risk mitigation measures, self-insurance becomes not only a viable alternative, but also a cost-effective one. Not-for-profit self-insurance also has the advantage of reducing some of the costs of the traditional market, such as acquisition costs, profit requirement, and possibly premium taxes as well. This webinar is an opportunity to explore precedents for collective self-insurance in the energy sector, its potential application beyond UK offshore wind export cables, and the link between insurance and asset management, which has become a focus for the O&M Club. Additionally, we will discuss the main challenges for subsea cables and how the O&M Club aims to improve system availability and operational expenditure. Today, we will be using the time to chat through the vision of the O&M Club in the form of a panel discussion, which will take us up to around 11:45, followed with a live Q&A session. We've got a dedicated Q&A section at the end, so please do put your questions in the Q&A box as we go, and we'll answer them then. So let us start with an introduction to the panellists, our organisations, and our role within the project. I'm Charlotte Strang-Moran. I'm an electrical infrastructure project engineer within OD Catapult. OD Catapult drive forward the UK's largest clean growth opportunity by accelerating the creation and growth of UK companies in offshore renewable energy. We have our testing and demonstration facilities, research and engineering capabilities to drive forward innovation. I specialise in offshore wind electrical infrastructure and electrical balance of plant. I've been working with the team on this particular model over the last 2 years, and I'm very glad to be here today to share our progress with you all. This type of initiative is all about accelerating the growth of offshore renewable energy through reducing operational expenditure from expensive repairs and large periods of downtime. OD Catapult are experienced in running large-scale industry consortiums with the aim of not-for-profit benefit to the industry and ultimately improving availability. This is why we've taken on the role that we have within the project. I would also like to introduce my colleague Nicola Robinson, who unfortunately is not here with us today, but is the project's development lead. I will now hand over to Michael Bullock.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good morning all. My name is Michael Bullock. I'm a Director of Renewable Risk Advisors, which is a insurance broker come risk consultancy focused on the renewable space, particularly offshore. We've been involved with the Catapult and Prospect Law from the outset of this for 3 or 4 years now, and our role in this, I'm project director of what we're discussing today, and renewable risks role in this has been about stakeholder engagement, discussing what the implications are for membership rules, and engaged in some of the data gathering and analysis work. David, over to you.
Sorry, David, you're on mute.
Yeah, just spotted that. Hi, my name is David Goodup. I work for Prospect Mutual Management, which is the mutual management division of Prospect Law. So we specialise in designing, building, launching, and managing mutuals for sectors to take the risk in-house or increase the level of risk that's managed in-house and reduce the amount that's spent on insurance for excess and aggregate covers. So some of my colleagues have been involved in this project from the start, but my expertise is more on the mutual management side of things than this project specifically. So if I can pass across to George now.
Good morning, everyone. My name's George Cobb. I'm a director at SALT Consultancy. I've been an advisor to the project, and SALT Consultancy specialises in regulatory advice to the off-tow sector. I've been involved in the project for a couple of years, and previously in my role as head of policy at Ofgem.
Perfect. So thank you all, and great to have you here with us today. We're going to be providing an overview of the offshore transmission owner landscape, an overview of how an O&M club is designed with energy security and net zero at its core, and how an O&M club has the opportunity to introduce asset management opportunities. So let's begin. So I'll kick things off with understanding a little bit more about the off-tow landscape. OFTOs are the owners of the transmission system for an offshore wind farm. They are responsible for transmitting the collected power from the array to the onshore grid. Therefore, they're responsible for owning and maintaining the offshore electricity transmission assets, including subsea export cables, as well as both offshore and onshore substation connections. These assets play a critical role in transporting electricity generated by offshore wind farms to the onshore grid. I'd like to pass over to Michael. Michael, what would you say is the main reason for us focusing on the OFTOs for the O&M Club?
But more than one, I would say. So the issues with cables offshore and in offshore wind in particular are well known, and most of us in the insurance sector repeat those concerns frequently. But specifically for the OFTO regime, this is a key bottleneck. These cables take all of the generation, subject to how many cables export cables there are from any one wind farm. It's a huge bottleneck with a substantial implication for loss of revenue. Also, we've seen in many of the early OFTOs in particular, difficulty in complying with their obligations to try and procure a broad level of cover following defects, which in insurance language is leg 3. Generally, some have had to accept lower coverage, which, for instance, if you have leg 2 cover, it excludes what it would have cost to repair a defect had it been known about before the event. So in that context, offshore, that can effectively exclude many of the marine operations costs, which is something like 2/3 of the repair cost typically. So these difficulties in this sector have a significant impact on the risk landscape for the OFTOs themselves and for the wind farms exporting through them.
Thanks, Michael. That was a great overview. George, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think it's just really critical, as Michael says, that we do now have a number of OFTOs which are approaching sort of mid to later life, and cable design and cable failures could be something that we actually start to see increase, which would then put a number of projects at significant risk as we are trying to approach our 2030 goals of decarbonisation. So ensuring that we can look at these projects, ensure that we can do mitigation work as much as anything to maintain these subsea cables is absolutely fundamental, particularly for net zero.
Excellent, thank you.
So we some of our analyses are presented here. These are from publicly available data, which we've crunched into, had to make some assumptions on, for instance, the value of the lost generation and the like. but there are a few themes shining through just from these two graphs that we thought were worth highlighting. One is in terms of the incidents. There's clearly a large number of both cable and onshore substation claims that predominate through the known causes. But also of those, it's very clear that the cable claims result in much longer outages, typically for very obvious reasons in terms of weather conditions, weather windows, and so on to launch the boats. And that is borne out in that second slide on the right-hand side, which shows both the substantial amount of loss, the value of the lost generation at wind farm level in particular, but also it shows how the amount of that downtime increases as you get away from the summer weather window in terms of the event being notified and dealt with. So Charlotte, in terms of the cables, you're the expert in this field. Could you explain what the issues are, please?
Yes, of course. So as Michael's already stated, there's a strong emphasis for us to lean towards the cables as a particular focus right now for the O&M club value and benefits. This is because, as mentioned, the data shown on that first graph really suggests that many of the risks to the OFTO system is the cable, the accessories, and the cable terminations at both ends of the system, switchgear to switchgear. Those failures that occur onshore have been assumed to be much quicker in repair due to less complex logistics of it being onshore and not requiring a vessel. Submarine cables are a high risk component for offshore wind. There are a number of difficulties facing subsea cables that may affect system availability and raise operating costs. These include external influences like fishing activity or anchor drag causing damage to cables. Different types of defects have the potential to interfere with data or power transfer, resulting in downtime and expensive repair bills as well. So we need regular asset management to avoid corrosion, wear and tear, and exposure to extreme conditions that can cause cables to deteriorate.
Thank you, Charlotte. And it's very clear that there's a very close links between the insurability and the cost of insurance on the one hand, and the operation and maintenance regimes in place. In particular, we discovered this more and more as we went through the process. In particular, the fact that commercial insurance policy requires the trigger of actual damage before it can kick in, whereas I think it's been fairly clear from, in particular, your deliberations through outreach to the suppliers of various solutions, that a club approach for operation and maintenance could reduce the cost of risk and therefore insurance considerably. How would you envisage that working, Charlotte, please? So
conducting maintenance and executing repairs in subsea cables can be technically challenging and very expensive due to the needs of exactly that, the specialised vessels, equipment and skilled personnel, and extended periods of downtime due to the repair taking place offshore. So as demonstrated in that second graph that you can see on the screen, which is events between 2013 to 2021, where the repair becomes an immediate necessity, the repair may be required during the winter months. And during this time, the repair becomes much harder to do, leading to increased costs. The periods of available work hours are reduced massively, and the UK's best wind production is missed, causing loss in revenue. So as such, the extended periods of cable downtime can result in such substantial financial losses and impact the overall project's economics and energy supply. So by including a unified and optimal O&M procedure and repair strategy across all club members, there can be substantial savings from this optimised maintenance and asset management approach, moving to preemptive repair and more scheduled based repairs. Michael, maybe I could direct this back to you. What is the link between asset management and insurance?
So in this sense, yes, we have the situation where insurance does require that damage trigger I mentioned. However, nonetheless, it can significantly benefit if we're able to implement a robust preemptive maintenance regime along the lines you're outlining there. So we would be drastically reducing the cost of risk. We would be effectively pushing the exposure to insurers back towards the unpredictable types of risk that they generally see themselves as better positioned for, rather than things which could be managed better and so on and so forth. So this is strongly, to my mind, playing to enhancing the risk profile of the entire sector.
That's a great point. Thank you, Michael. I don't know if anyone else would like to come in here as well. George?
Yeah, I think it really is, and again, I think it's as we, continue to have aging assets, I think the relationship between the developer and the OFTO needs to be very much a sort of hand in glove relationship, and really working at where there is going to be more maintenance carried out on the wind farm. Is there the same period that maintenance can be, or repairs carried out on items like the subsea cables? So again, when we're not seeing generation from the developer, we are carrying out the repairs, and that means that we are minimizing the amount of downtime. It means that we are collectively working together, and it also means that overall the UK bill payer and our aspirations for net zero are enhanced. So yeah, I think it's just a really key thing that although those relationships happen during the earlier part of life of the OFTO and the developer, I think as we start to see aging assets and the requirement for more potential O&M and repairs, I think it really has to be this focus of looking at preemptive and not reactive repairs.
Brilliant. Thank you. Let's move on to the next slide then. And David, what are the key observations on how the OFTOs have an opportunity to save money through this type of club and collective insurance model?
It's bringing the management and control of the risk back in-house and being in control of that decision-making process. So as Charlotte's touched on already, it's that the preemptive repairs, being able to undertake the in a timely and considered and planned way, rather than having to be a reactive repair. So it's the whole framework of the mutual provides that ownership and control, and brings that decision making back to the OFTOs, and enables these decisions to be made on a more common sense and optimized basis, rather than being dictated by policy terms as to when cover is triggered and when cover is available, and how those repairs should be effected.
Brilliant, thank you. Michael, maybe one to direct to yourself. What other initiatives has there been before? Has this type of model been done previously?
Yes, it certainly has, in various complementary fashions. So in particular, I point to a very direct comparison to the club approach taken by the offshore telecoms sector, which is obviously extremely sensitive and critical infrastructure. They have a club approach. They actually have a vessel available pretty much full time for immediate call out for standby repairs, and they have warehouses full of spare cables that are able to be applied at in a variety of different cable routings. So the club approach certainly has. The mutual approach very much has as well, with a slightly different emphasis. So, for instance, Everend, that used to be called OIL, is a much bigger scale mutual for the oil and gas insurers. We're not seeking here to quite emulate that, because we're not looking to oust the commercial insurers from the sector in the way that to some extent has, so much as creating here a working layer for those preemptive repairs of perhaps the first £15 million, which is typically what we're looking at for a summer intervention for that preemptive maintenance with limited weather downtime. So it's more of a working O&M layer, rather than try to replace the insurance kind of structure that OIL did. Excuse me. The other The other factor we haven't discussed much yet is that in the first year or 4 or 5 years probably of a mutual, it's at risk of there being an excess frequency of calls on the funding for those interventions. So if there's a large number of requirements in any one year, it could have insufficient funds, insufficient contingencies, reserves built up from previous years. So we're looking to encourage some public sector reinsurance into that, which maybe we could discuss in more detail later. But as a sort of government reinsurance backstop to that, again, that model is something that's been replicated for both terrorism with Pool Re and for flood with Flood Re, and the government is well aware that there are times when some sort of reinsurance backstop is required for helping areas which are otherwise difficult to insure. So I think there's a variety of parallels which very much play to what we're trying to achieve here.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. George, a slightly different question for you. How does the club support the UK's drive towards energy security and net zero?
I think it just really builds on the points we've already discussed, is that we need the renewables to support our winter. So where you have high wind and you have maximum output. And these are typically, from the data we've seen to date, is when you have cable failures. And so if we are going to be able to move to a renewable-based energy system, we need to know that our assets are in top performing ability during these winter months. So what this really does focus on is about moving those risks to summer months, and builds on what Michael has already said in terms of it's not a case of just moving the campaigns, which are costly in winter, which are dangerous because of the sea conditions, but also, again, they are very, very difficult to, recover a subsea cable from the seabed and not cause further damage. So what this is really going to do is it's going to look at ensuring that our renewable assets, which are now becoming substantial, are available when we need them during the winter months. And it will allow those assets to be generating at cost-effective rate, because we are removing these costly insurance claims and removing the need for insurance to cover business interruption and things like this. Because if we can do it in a planned and organized fashion, then that would allow us to minimize the amount of downtime. You could potentially be moving an outage from 90 days to 30 days if it's properly planned and properly executed, and it has spares on site, and we know the type of cable and we know the process that we would adopt. You also have the ability of, not to the extent that Michael was talking about, having a boat on standby, but you would be able to forecast and you would plan, and you might be able to get a sort of cheaper vessel during a period. And again, often you would be able to get a larger vessel, which again de-risks these types of repairs. So overall, it really is the primary driver of this, to just ensure that we have the renewables when we need the renewables.
Excellent. Thank you, George. So if we jump on to our next slide for the session, I can kick us off here with an overview of what the asset management opportunities are. Through the work that's been done so far towards the Collective Self-Insurance O&M Club, various asset management opportunities have been identified through historical data that we've collected, as Michael's already mentioned, and the engagement that we've carried out with industry. The opportunities include improvements to preemptive repairs, we've already discussed, looking at a unified risk assessment and inspection programme, looking to assess potential risks and conducting regular inspections to identify vulnerabilities and address them proactively, looking at conducting regular inspections, but with advanced technologies like underwater drones, acoustic monitoring that can detect early signs of damage and degradation. Another example of an asset management opportunity is the integration of monitoring technologies. So looking at optimized combined technologies to benefit preemptive repairs. We can do that with a better visualization of the condition monitoring systems through working with industry experts to help us form that technical development. We can look at financial support. This can either be through the work of incentives or from reduced cost through sharing the financial burden of leasing equipment and maintenance across all club members. We can look at data management as well, using data to support a number of different asset management opportunities. With better data, the opportunities become much easier to achieve. And then there's, of course, collective procurement, where we can look at club-agreed contractual repair pools, looking at quick response service for major component failure, looking at club-agreed mutual assistance agreements. This isn't quite a repair pool, but it is standardised agreements looking to share resources such as spare cables, specialised repair vessels and skilled personnel. And of course, club-agreed OFTO and supplier collaboration. So working with the suppliers to determine appropriate and collective spares, equipment and storage systems. By focusing on these initiatives, the O&M Club aims to improve system availability, reduce downtime and optimise operational expenditure for offshore wind projects. But before we can provide a list of how exactly we want to achieve the asset management opportunities, the club has to be set up. The mutual pricing model and the club structure is so heavily influenced by the club members. So the club members decide which asset management opportunities we look to take forward. David, while we're on this point, could you explain to us what the club's governance documentation looks like and how is that linked closely with the asset management opportunities?
Yeah, the link between the asset management, insurance and loss mitigation for the OFTO Mutual is one of the most innovative aspects of the project. A strong collective asset management opportunity will benefit not just the OFTOs, but potentially the generators, customers, and ultimately energy consumers. As noted already in this webinar, the OFTO Mutual will incorporate an innovative asset management program as part of the structure to include common spares holdings, information sharing on and condition monitoring and preemptive projects to mitigate the exposure and the possible collective access to repair infrastructure. The mutual runs on a set of governance documents, the rules and constitution, which determine how the mutual operates, and that the members are heavily involved in the finalisation of all of those documents, ensuring that the mutual operates in a manner that's fit for purpose for their needs and expectations as to how it will operate. For example, that they need to agree the threshold as to what level of damage will trigger access to cover within the mutual structure. All these sorts of decision makings fall within their control rather than having to be abdicated to a third party provider. So it gives them the opportunity to create a bespoke solution that's specific for their needs. The mutual rules will capture the baseline information from Catapult in terms of the asset management obligations of each member to ensure that there's a consistency and equity between members and that there's a common base that the performances and pricing is measured from. And the rules will outline the requirements for regular audits and standards expected to ensure that the risk management standards are comparable across the membership, giving that consistent benchmarking across all of the members. And specific governance relating to the asset management will also include the allocation of responsibilities, decision-making, cost and data sharing in any external engagement.
Brilliant, thank you, David. I don't know if there's anything else with regards to the asset management opportunities that either George or Mike would like to come in and mention. I know we've already kind of spoke about it throughout the webinar as well.
If I may, so just the other side of that reduction of risk, where we're talking about contingent business interruption, etc., is that what we are doing at system level is reducing the volatility of the outages from offshore wind farms to the system. So we're actually enhancing energy security overall, as well as there being the pure immediate financial benefits to the OFTOs and potentially to the wind farms as well. So there's various broad benefits to the system overall, I would say.
I think also, and again, just to kind of give a little bit more context, so there's 28 live OFTOs currently. So when we're talking about spares, each one of those has several kilometers of cable that they will keep in spare. So they all need to store them somewhere. They need to be able to have access to them. Then there are the accessories that you need to go with your cable and your cable repairs. And again, so you probably have 2, 3, maybe 4 joints that you have to keep. Now, joints don't last forever. And so again, you need to be able to monitor these, and you have to be able to have ones that are compatible with your cable. And again, you would then have to be replacing and procuring these over the life of the asset. Because again, there's no point having cable if you don't have the accessories. And so what we're really talking here is that potentially at any one point, there's 28 different OFTOs potentially holding somewhere between 4, 5, 6 million pounds in spares. And so even if we manage to attract half of those OFTOs to the cable collective, then again that's a saving of 50 million pounds over the life, or over certain cycles of the life. And you just really start to see the size and scale of this. With the number of wind farms to be developed in the UK, we could be looking at, within the next sort of 10 years, that number of OFTOs being up to 40, 45 OFTOs. And again, so it's really just a compounding issue that if we don't attract, or we don't come together collectively as an industry to look at this from the mutual perspective, there is going to be a lot of waste. There's going to be a lot of fat that we don't need to have. And it really is just that ability to come together, remain. We still need to have a competitive environment for the procurement of OFTOs, and we're not saying that should be taken away, but where we can seek to drive cost effectiveness through insurance collectively, or spares, or asset management, this should definitely be done. It is absolutely no-brainer, and the numbers are staggering. They're staggering now, and they're only going to get bigger.
Brilliant. Thank you, George. It's a very good point, and it also leads us nicely onto our final slide for today. One question worth raising, and Michael, I'll ask this to you. Do we see that this model could be used in the other parts of offshore wind, or even on a wider scale, the energy sector as a whole?
I mean, it's certainly the case that across the entire offshore renewables space, there are issues already which are only going to get worse when it comes to, in particular, the availability of vessels and the like. A club approach for ensuring that there is actual standby vessels that you have first call on, rather than trying to wait for the vessels to become available on the spot market, which could be at extremely high rates or only available in the winter when the weather windows are very limited and the like, would have huge benefits. So there's broad applicability on a number of these issues, and clearly some of the advances in the capabilities you've identified would have considerable implications for example, monitoring dynamic cables in floating offshore wind. So I think there's a lot of cross fertilization across the sector that this sort of joined up teamwork cooperation approach could have. Yes.
Excellent. Brilliant. I don't know if there's any further points from the team before we summarize our session for today.
Just one point. I know George mentioned that the downtime could be 30 days instead of 90 days. We've seen longer in some instances, more than 120 days in here and there. And when you extrapolate the cost of the vessel downtime, as well as the loss of revenue from that length of outage, a rough rule of thumb, we reckon you could be looking at quarter of the size of losses if you adopt this preemptive maintenance approach through using the sensors better rather than wait for it to break. So putting things into context, that's a vast potential benefit, I think, and significantly what this is all about.
Another huge benefit is looking at optimizing vessel scheduling and working together to identify the priority list of who requires a vessel and when. Having that coordination and collaboration between the OFTOs will hopefully speed up specific repairs as well, because although we want to push to everything happening during the summertime and everything going to plan, we will still have catastrophic failures. These incidents do occur. So we have to be able to be prepared to deal with that. And by working together, we'll be in a better position to do so as well. Excellent. Well, we're now looking to finish up our session today. So I'd like to finish it with some statements from the team. So I'll kick it off. From myself, I would like to state that there is a great opportunity here to move towards a more collective approach of shared spares, optimization of both repair and maintenance procedures, and accessibility to new technologies and creating new standards. The OFTOs will be able to determine their own responsibilities and requirements to be a member, thus supporting the club members to deal with the main issues faced by them. And now I'll move on to Michael, if you've got a kind of finishing statement that you would like to share with everybody.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Charlotte. So in particular, when it comes to those new technologies referenced by Charlotte, the increased efficiency and reliability of sensor systems and the software, critically, that can interpret all the different signals coming from them, is reaching a stage now where these opportunities for a much more efficient system exist now fairly definitively. And it's difficult for the commercial insurance sector to adjust quickly to these sort of enhancements. So much so, I think when we've discussed with insurers what's going on here, they broadly welcome the idea of enhancing the whole reliability of the sector and enhancing the O&M regime. This would dovetail neatly with that and in improving the whole landscape for the commercial insurances as well. So I think it's a very neat fit rather than any conflict in that sense.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. David?
Yeah, just following up from Michael's comment, the aim of the mutual would be to work in partnership with the insurance industry. The primary objective of the mutual is to retain all of the expected losses within the mutual, avoiding a pound swapping with insurance companies on expected losses. Managing that risk in a more proactive way, adopting that proactive stance in terms of the sensors and the risk mitigation and the proactive repairs that the mutual can do within its own funds, but then still being reliant on the support from the insurance industry, both on a per claim and an aggregate basis for losses beyond the retention in the mutual. So it's very much a harmonious relationship that we're targeting between the OFTOs, the mutuals, which they would own and control, the support required from the insurance industry, and the benefits that would hopefully supply to everybody on both ends of the OFTO cables as a result of that. Fantastic.
Thanks, David. And George?
Yeah, again, I think just echoing what my other panelists have said, I think it's a real opportunity for the industry. I think it's an opportunity not only to sort of reduce costs going forward, but I think looking at the net zero aspirations, I think it's an opportunity to maintain these assets so that they continue to produce green electrons into the future, and a future that is uncertain from an insurance perspective. And again, I think this mutual allows that uncertainty to be de-risked for all parties. And again, it's not in conflict with insurance. We will still need the insurance industry, but this, I feel, is a sandbox for where there are potential risks to be addressed, to allow a smoother continuation of offshore wind in the UK.
Brilliant. That's excellent. So I'd like to thank the project team for a great panel discussion, and I look forward now to opening up the floor to Q&A. We have an extra 3 minutes, which is excellent. So hopefully we have lots of great questions. So let's take a look at the Q&A box. So the first question that we have is the OFTO related event slide doesn't discriminate between intra-array and export cables. What sort of split would this be? So I'd be happy to answer that one. We are looking at export cables at the moment. We are focusing on the OFTO, so the data that we have is solely on export cables and the onshore and offshore substations. There's a lot of lessons learned that we can take from inter-array cable failure as well, but you're absolutely right. We should be keeping them separate when we look at data collection.
If I may add,
of course.
Sorry, Charlotte,
No, that's good.
the data is actually drawn from Ofgem's website
Yes.
in relation to OFTO events specifically, so that's where that came from. So it does only cover, as Charlotte says, the export cables.
Excellent. The next question we have is, what is the exact battery limit for responsibility for damages at the offshore substation and the onshore substation? So I'm not entirely sure what is meant by battery limit, but the responsibility for the damages at the onshore and offshore substation, the OFTO is responsible for delivering the power from the offshore substation to the onshore grid. They are responsible for any repairs that are required on their side of the onshore substation. I hope that answers your question. I don't know, George, if you've got anything else that you could maybe add to that.
No, and again, the sort of OFTO license that is granted by Ofgem is for the full ownership, operation, and maintenance of those assets. And again, you can see from the slide, slide 3, again, we've kind of tried to show where the boundaries are there in terms of where the ownership passes from the generator to the OFTO. Again, it's something that we could follow up with if we've not answered that question.
Thank you, George. The next question we have is there a breakdown of failures due to latent defects or third-party interactions? This is a great question. If you go online to view the Ofgem events that we've worked with, you can see that there is limited information. So we've worked with what was available on the OFTO data, and also working with industry directly to get a better understanding of potentially particular failure modes that were apparent, and the potential causes of them as well. And we've worked from that to try and identify some of the key loss scenarios that we've worked with throughout our own investigations. And Michael, I don't know if there's anything additional you'd like to add to that.
I think that covers it, although I think pretty without having looked at them for a couple of months, I think the vast majority were defect related rather than we didn't see too many anchor hitting or anything like that. So I think it's predominantly defects. Yes.
Brilliant. Next question: has any consideration been given to date on the annotation between the club and warranty periods, or is the focus of this being post-warranty?
That's probably interaction, I guess. I would say so. We haven't taken into account specifically how much of these would be covered under warranty, so much as the actual declared events. Clearly the who has to pay for the repairs would vary significantly depending on whether it's within or outside warranty. Some of the risk management measures would apply both before and after, though, I would suggest.
Yeah, warranties would be a consideration and a potential source of recovery, but there's limitations under most of the warranties as well. So there's going to be things that, even if the product's under warranty, there's going to be exposures that would currently flow to the insurance placement as well as the warranty. So the warranty is viewed more as a potential recovery source rather than a primary source.
Brilliant. Excellent. The next question that we have is about getting in touch with the companies here to discuss a project proposal. So if you are interested in that, please do just reach out to the members in the webinar, and we'd be happy to discuss that with you. The next question from the same person is, do you also have a focus on insurance and asset management for offshore wind turbine blades? What are the top challenges with blades? That's a great question, and I could potentially get one of my colleagues to answer that for you who specialise in blades and blade reliability. I probably am not the best person to answer that question, but it's a great point, and it is something that we've discussed before, is how could we adapt or expand our model to look at different parts of the offshore wind industry, and of course a large scale the energy sector as a whole. We have another question. Could the export cable monitoring systems mentioned in the call be retrofitted? That's an excellent question. And I think when we're looking at systems that are already up and running, the OFTOs that are currently in place at the moment, we would be looking to work with them to retrofit the equipment that they're looking for. So ultimately, it would be retrofit that we'd be looking to do if we were working with the OFTOs to add on additional systems to their transmission system. But ultimately, it is really down to the OFTOs to decide what systems they would like and if they require any additional systems as well. In a lot of cases, it might be looking at the systems that they already have and looking to analyse that data perhaps in a slightly different way. So it's ultimately up to the OFTO what they would like us to work with them on. But ideally, retrofitting would be the way forward if we were looking to add on more condition monitoring systems. I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add to that.
Just to note that at tidal energy site at the Maygen, they have recently implemented a system retroactively to review how results. So there is an ongoing study there which was done retroactively. So it definitely can be done depending on the type of sensor system, I'm sure.
Of course.
I think probably also just highlighting that, you know, the majority of these transmission cables have active fibers.
Yes.
And so again, there are a lot of monitoring systems that can use those fibers to monitor cable, certainly. So yeah, retrofitting is not an issue.
Brilliant. Next question's a great one. What has been the response from the OFTOs to date? Would it be useful to invite an OFTO representative to future calls? I will say for future calls, it would be great for us to include an OFTO representative, but I'll hand over to Michael to give a full response to that question.
Thank you, Charlotte. So yes, I think I would describe it as cautiously welcoming. So they do certainly recognise the advantages we're talking about here. There is the cautious element is that we're focused strongly on operation and maintenance and insurance, which are a significant part of the business model for the OFTOs. So they want to really see and fully understand the benefits before they fully engage and fully endorse it. They also, I think, really want to see what level of public support there might be along the lines of the reinsurance we were discussing earlier, because, as we said, there's a possibility if there was an unusually high frequency of events in the first years that may make it very expensive for the club to get off the ground. So cautiously positive, and the next discussions with them will engage in more detail on the findings of our recent work. So we'll hopefully know more after that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Next question. Can you implement a procurement syndicate for spares and vessels without the insurance element? That's an interesting question, and I think I'll bounce that back off of Michael as well.
Thank you, Charlotte. I mean, I think you can. It's the insurance element is really sort of is there because there would be, there may be a higher frequency from one OFTO than another, and balancing that out in any one year is a useful part of the whole process. But it could still stand with some of the benefits we've discussed if it was just purely a framework agreement for access to vessels and common spares. And that is probably, I think, significantly the approach adopted by the telecoms club I mentioned earlier, albeit they do pay a standing fee regularly anyway, which isn't quite an insurance premium, but it goes to averaging out some of their costs. So it could, in short, yes.
Brilliant.
I
Yeah,
think
George?
I think probably also, again, there are certain cable clubs, not so much for the OFTOs, but sometimes for the sort of onshore TOs, who again have certainly at distribution level a large number of cables and keep a large number of spares. There are sometimes an issue when a new OFTO is created that the developer will put conditions around certain types of spares, and that they are unwilling to share those spares. But what we are seeing is that as we have a sort of small number of OFTO owners who have large number of cables, that there are sort of small syndicates, basically. But again, it would be better to have that done over cable type rather than just bringing new cable into older assets, because not every cable can be used in every situation.
And the rules and the constitution of the mutual provide the framework that all of this is done within as well, which provides the alternative structure to, sitting outside the insurance industry for doing it.
Excellent. Okay, next question. Have there been any discussions with the government to underwrite the insured risk?
Shall I kick off with that one, Charlotte? So there is a green finance team within DESNES that is now engaged in a working group, including also, crucially, probably Treasury officials, where they have recognised, not just in offshore renewables but in others, that there are some areas, particularly of emerging risk, where the route to net zero requires some support for the insurance sector, because leaving it all to commercial insurers isn't necessarily going to work. It's not what they're there for in some instances. This specific concept has been discussed with them and is an ongoing discussion. So there are some positive signs at an early stage, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael.
Doesn't preclude the insurance industry either. So, with the mutual taking that primary layer of risk and hopefully managing the assets and reducing the claims costs, the ability insurers are providing cover in this space already. So the aim would just be to push up the attachment point to make life a bit easier for them, remove the attritional losses from them, have those dealt with in the mutual in a hopefully a more efficient and cost-effective manner than is available within the insurance industry, so that the mutual could work in partnership with those supporting insurers for the excess and aggregate cover, reducing any reliance on third parties that may be needed as well.
Brilliant. We have another question here. What would the risk modelling and forecasting needs of the club look like? So ultimately, I think, Michael, you can come in on this perhaps after me, but the process would still be very similar, except for we'd be looking at having a collective form of lessons learned and data that will feed into it. But ultimately, it is down to the club members to identify what they need and what they would want as a requirement within the club. But Michael, I'll now pass over to you.
I think that's right. So having said that, we're developing significant confidence in these new sensoring software analysis capabilities. Obviously, the more data you can prove the value of them, the better. So that will significantly develop over the coming years with actual actual data from applying these in practice and seeing it's not going to pick up every single possible defect. So how much we are picking up on these systems and how much we're not, and how much we're able to, how much time and cost we're able to save by implementing them will become much clearer, hopefully fairly rapidly. But that will definitely feed into the future forecasting as the amount of OFTO cabling length, the length is forecast for the coming years is huge. So applying that to the future needs of the sector will be very important indeed.
Brilliant, thank you. We have another comment from a listener who is looking at something similar with respect to floating offshore wind with moorings, cables and blades. And I absolutely agree. This would be a good opportunity to discuss and share lessons learned. So please do get in touch with us and we'd be happy to take this offline as well. Another question, how would you see the asset monitoring technology being implemented? Would this be a requirement placed on all members? And if so, who chooses the monitoring equipment to be employed? That's a great question. And it comes back again to the club members creating the responsibilities and requirements for the members. Now, what we're looking to do, our role as the Catapult within this model, is to work with the consortium of OFTOs to help identify some of the key areas for further investigating or for further developing. And to do so, we'd be working with the OFTOs to identify optimised condition monitoring, how that may vary across different sites across the UK, and ultimately identifying an optimised combination of condition monitoring systems if that is identified as an asset management opportunity that the OFTOs require. That would then define what monitoring equipment would be used. So ultimately, although we are here to provide our knowledge and insight into the model, it is ultimately up to the OFTO members to determine what they would like to have on their systems. I don't know if there's anybody else here that would like to feed into that. Okay, great. Next question. Great initiative, thank you. How do you envisage, I obviously can't say that word, so we'll pass it. How do you see insurers being involved in supporting an OFTO's clients' involvement in the mutual? Can they support the standardisation of OFTO asset management? Michael, can I pass this on to you?
You certainly can. So yes, thank you. I mean, by virtue of the fact that we're hoping to engage with insurers, I think the answer is a very resounding yes. We would very much welcome insurer buy-in to the risk management, the asset management techniques that are hoping to be encouraged by this whole approach. So yes, the more feedback that is available, the better, I would say.
Brilliant. Now we do have a couple extra questions, but I will need to call it there. So thank you all greatly for your attendance and excellent questions. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions at all and we didn't get round to answering them, or if you have any more questions that you'd like to ask. I hope you all have a fantastic week and thank you all very much for your time.